And done.
Let me check the list here. Okay, good. Whoa, Pierre. What? I thought we weren't going to do this anymore.
Come on. It's been long enough. I got a good feeling.
I thought we said no more tight end booms.
Yeah, but look, once you hear what I had to say, I think you'll be convinced. Just hear me out. Yeah, sometimes there aren't obvious picks, for these players who are going to break out. I'll let you wait to find out who this week's tight end is definitely going to go off and smash. But we got several names here. These guys, I think, are going to be must starts in week 8. But first on your must-do list, subscribe to our channel. Look, if you get any value from the videos that we put out for you every single day, plus the live streams, constantly trying to help you win, help us out. We're on the way to 100K. We want you to be a part of it. All right, this week it feels like we got a lot of players that in the not too distant past were kind of no-brainers, right? It's like you just don't question it. They were already must-starts, and this year had a little bit of doubt in guys like Derrick Henry. And I feel like even after having a pretty good game right before the bye, people are still selling low on Derrick Henry. People are still questioning, do I really want to start Derrick Henry? I don't get it, and I'm not just saying this because his name is Derrick Henry. But look, I get you're a little disappointed this year. He's only averaging 5 yards per carry compared to last year where it was 5.9 yards per carry. Only 4 touchdowns in 6 games. Yeah, I mean, that's not great, right? He's not smashing. But look, I think the fact that Lamar Jackson has already missed a couple of weeks might have something to do with it. In fact, look at the games where Cooper Rush was at quarterback and Derrick Henry, was basically all they had to worry about on the opposing defense. Yeah, not only did they lose those games, but he was just far less efficient, predictably so. And this is part of the thing with Derrick Henry. Good news is he's on a very good team that usually is playing from ahead. That just hasn't happened early in the season, partly because Lamar Jackson and also partly because they've had a brutal start to the season in terms of schedule. But I don't know if I mentioned this at any point yet. You might know that Baltimore gets a great schedule the rest of the way, and that starts right here in week 8.
Yeah, it starts right here against the Chicago Bears. Lamar Jackson back at practice. Got to think he's playing this week. That is good for this entire offense. And another thing I think that's kind of going under the radar, it's not being talked about, although I've talked about it on a couple of the videos. I think the defense is going to get healthier coming out of the bye. So I don't think we're going to see the Bears just do whatever they want against this defense. But either way, I don't think it matters for Derrick Henry this week. You look at it right now in the season, 58% of his rushes are those outside zone runs. And his yards per carry is a very good 5.3 yards per carry on those runs versus 4.6 yards per carry on those inside runs. Then you look at it on the flip side, the Bears here, they're allowing the 3rd highest yards per carry on those outside zone runs, 5.19 yards per carry. So this is a perfect matchup for that outside zone. Those are the plays he can hit those home runs on. I think we see a home run this week. Not only that, when you look at fantasy points, they have their offensive line, defensive line matchup tool. They give the Ravens the best offensive line versus defensive line matchup of the week. Significantly better than any other matchup here. And as you said, the Ravens this week, Vegas believes in the Ravens this week. They have a 28.25 implied team total. According to this tweet from Hayden Winks, says when the Ravens score 20 or more points in the games Henry has played with them, he averages 20 half PPR points per game. I think Derrick Henry is going to smash coming out of the bye. If you bought low, you're going to be very happy you did. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to take it one step further here. I'm going to do something I normally don't do. I'm going to take Derrick Henry's touchdown line. I'm going to go higher than 0.5. I think he gets at least 1 touchdown this week. I'm going to take that line. I'm going to pair it with the gimme pick that you get by being a new customer when you join using promo code ENDGAME. You pair those picks together, play just $5. Win or lose, they're going to give you $100. Not to mention, they're going to match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Just make sure you sign up on Underdog right now using promo code ENDGAME.
Now, just when it had gotten to the point where rookie wide receiver Emeka Egbuka had become pretty much a no-brainer, like you just keep him in your lineup, right? It doesn't matter which other Bucs receiver was in or out. And then tragedy struck, or at least a very short-term minor tragedy. Egbuka hurt, thought he was going to miss several weeks, and no, he played last week. And, it was kind of tilting at first to see him in when you probably sat him because we had no idea he was going to play, and that was a Monday night game. But then you weren't really too disappointed because, yeah, he played and he was targeted and just didn't do a whole lot in that game otherwise. which now is going to lead to the question, is he really healthy, right? Are they rushing him back? Maybe he's just not going to be effective. Maybe this Tampa Bay offense isn't going to be what it used to. No Godwin, no Evans, no Bucky still. Look, Igbuka can only keep it going for so long, you figure, right? Baker Mayfield had his first really down game last week. Maybe Igbuka isn't a guy that you have to keep in your lineup. Except that he is, because keep in mind, sure, he maybe was not at 100%. You figured there's no way he was fully healthy if they didn't even know he was going to play until game time, right? It was down to the wire. The opportunity is still there, and it was massive. In fact, last week, being there on probably less than 100% that ankle, he was 12th, tied with Justin Jefferson in expected fantasy points last week. Imagine with another week to get a little bit better and knowing that Evans is not going to be there, you figure the opportunity is not only going to be there, but the matchup is as well.
Yeah, the matchup is great as well. Way better than the matchup he had last week. Saints right now allowing the 7th most points to outside wide receivers. And you look at it in the games where either, like last week, Mike Evans left early or completely missed the games. Igbuka's played 72% of his snaps on the outside here. The Saints, I've talked about it a couple times now on these videos. They have Alontae Taylor, their slot corner. He's good. But all the rest of their corners are not very good. They're not going to be able to stop Emeka Egbuka here. I mean, we've already seen Marvin Harrison Jr., Jawan Jennings, and Kayshon Boutte, 3 guys who, primarily just play on the outside, have their best games of the season against the Saints. Not sure Emeka Egbuka is going to have his best game of the season because he's had some good games, but it's going to be right up there with him. Plus, you look at it, the Saints play the 5th most single high and cover 3 against these shells. Again, when you eliminate the games where Mike Evans started and finished the games, he leads the team in targets per route run, first read percentage, and he's second in yards per route run. And you mentioned it, he had some very, very close calls last week. Could have been a monster game. I think this week, with Baker Mayfield not getting, pressured by that Saints front, they're going to connect on those plays, and he's going to go off.
Well, then a receiver you thought would just be set and forget pretty much all season took all of 2 games before we had to not only sit T. Higgins, but avoid him. I mean, he was unstartable for weeks. And then Joe came back. Of course, I'm talking about Joe Flacco. Joe to the rescue. That's right, cool Joe. And, we were kind of half joking that maybe this is all they needed. Apparently, this is all that they needed in that Bengals offense because it took all of 2 weeks for him to revive this passing offense in a big way. And look, on the one hand, you can say, okay, it was the Steelers. Steelers have been atrocious on defense this year, right? That just happened to be one of these games. The old gunslingers were shooting it out. Okay. Or you could look at the previous week where it was Joe Flacco's first game as a Bengal. He was there for like 3 days before he had to start. And they were facing basically the best defense in the NFL, and the Packers on the road. Maybe that's why he didn't put up great numbers that game. Now, the reality will probably lie somewhere in between the rest of the season, but at the very least, we know we can start T. Higgins with confidence going forward. T. Higgins was also top 20 in expected fantasy points last week, while Jamar Chase was feasting, right, going off, and number 1 in expected fantasy points, I think number 2 in total fantasy points, only behind CMC, and yet T. Higgins is still up there with him. You've got to feel just as good about Higgins as you would have, the early part of the season when Burrow was there. Right? Almost as good. But you got to feel great about him this week.
Yeah, you got to feel great about him this week for a couple reasons. Number 1, Sauce Gardner. Look, right now he's in the concussion protocol, so we'll have to see how it goes throughout the week if he plays. But you got to think if he does play, he's probably going to be shadowing Jamar Chase here. And now, look, it's not like the rest of the Jets corners are scrubs. There's still some tough guys out here, but it's not Sauce Gardner. And if Sauce Gardner misses, that's even better because now you're talking about Michael Carter III, who's coming back from injury, probably being forced to play, and he has not been good this year. So either way, I think this matchup does favor T. Higgins in that aspect. But also, you look at it, the Jets play the 7th most man and cover 1 of any defense. This year, against man and cover 1, he actually leads Chase in targets per out run, yards per out run, and first read percentage. So even schematically, this is one of those games that, obviously you're not benching Chase, but this might be one of those weeks where T. Higgins is better than Chase. So I think T. Higgins, after what we've seen with Joe Flacco, even that first week against the Packers, he gave you a floor. It wasn't like he was a bust. He gets in zone targets, red zone targets. He's always got a chance to score. I think you've got to have T. Higgins in your lineup this week.
Now, it's been hard to say on a weekly basis whether you really want or need Stephon Diggs in your lineup. It's been a little up and down, right? And I feel like we're not only on the way up, but it's becoming a little bit more predictable that yes, you can keep him locked in your lineup because the Pats offense is becoming slightly more, I'd just say consistent, maybe not predictable. They want to pass the ball. Now, a lot of these teams that have these high pass rate over expectation percentages, like the Patriots, who are 8th, in that specific category, a lot of it's just because they can't run the ball, right? They just don't want to run the ball because they can't, right? A team like the Texans, not because they have such a great passing game, it's just their rushing game is that poor. It's kind of both for the Patriots. I mean, obviously, Mondre, despite last week, hasn't been great. Trayvon Henderson, let's face it, you look at the stats, he doesn't deserve to be out there anymore, right? The breakout's not happening because he has been bad. And Josh McDaniels wants to throw the ball, and why not? He's got a great franchise quarterback in Drake May, who's looking good, and Stephon Diggs is looking like vintage Stephon Diggs. Now, on the one hand, his season-long numbers aren't nearly what they were a couple years ago, right? He's got 5.6 receptions per game and 65.1 yards per game. It's not amazing. It's solid. But again, it's been a lot of boom or bust, right? Those 2 down games really kind of sunk those averages. He's had some big games, especially lately. I'll tell you what is his career high catch rate, 88% of the time. So when he's out there and getting targeted, he is bringing it in. And so that means if the targets keep coming, which they have been, he's due for a lot of fancy points. And that's probably going to be the case again this week.
Yeah, I think so. You talk about it. The Patriots, not a good running team, even though they had success last week. But I said, hey, this is a good matchup for the Patriots running game. This week is the opposite. The Browns, the toughest run defense, you've got to think they're probably going to be very high in pass rate over expectation again. Plus, you look at it just schematically, this Browns defense, it honestly could not be better for Stephon Diggs this week. The Browns played the 6th most man and the 3rd most single high. He's absolutely dominated these shells this year. He's got a 0.35 targets per out run, an insane 5.77 yards per out run, and a 37% first read percentage. But the reason why it's so good, because look, last week Diggs had a nice game, but what happened? Booty had the touchdown again, right? Kind of annoying. Why does this guy get the touchdowns? Well, look at Booty against these same shells. He's actually been Booty. 0.07 target per out run, 1.37 yards per out run, and only a 0.7 first read percentage. I don't think this is a week you want to start Booty. I think he's going to be Booty this week, and I think Diggs is going to be the guy you want. So in a game where the Patriots are probably not going to be able to run the football, they're going to have to rely on Drake May and Stephon Diggs, and I think Stephon Diggs is going to absolutely go off.
Now, I know a lot of you out here think that AJB has been pretty Booty this year because had some down games early in the season. It wasn't until last week you're like, okay, finally he did something, which is a little unfair, not true. It's not like he had done absolutely nothing. I mean, sure, there were a couple games where it pretty much was like that. But I'll tell you, rewind before last week where he had his huge game, faced the Giants. You already know this matchup is coming again. And he didn't score a touchdown because they insisted on force-feeding Dallas Goedert the ball. But AJB was still very good. 6 catches, 80 yards, because this matchup works in his favor. But before we talk about that, just want to keep in mind, he has not been horrible all season long. He's still top 20 in targets overall. We keep saying this. He's been getting targeted. There just was some misconnections early in the season. I think it looks like they finally have figured that out. So if we're still worried about A.J. Brown, I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand why. He had a stretch there where he was really, really bad, but this is a great matchup for him. And we almost put him on the booms before that last Giants game, but we couldn't because it was a Thursday night game. And maybe that was a good thing because he didn't boom. He wasn't bad, but he didn't boom. But remember, that was the Eagles. That was the Eagles looking like the worst we've seen them in a long time. They looked much better last week. The defense is getting healthier. Remember, that was in New York. Now they're at home against the Giants. And the one thing about A.J. Brown you can always count on is this guy dominates man coverage. The Giants play the 2nd most man in the league. You look at it this year, he's got a 0.41 targets per out run, 4.34 yards per out run, and a 41.2% first read percentage against man. In fact, if you look at it among all wide receivers that have run at least 25 routes versus man this year, he's 2nd in targets per out run and 3rd in yards per route run and first read percentage. He dominates man coverage. And if that's not enough for you, look at it last year where he ranked 3rd in targets per route run, 1st in yards per route run, and had an absolutely insane 54.8 first read percentage versus man. Have I mentioned yet that A.J. Brown absolutely feasts on man coverage? At home, rematch against the Giants, man coverage, he's going to feast this week.
Now, in case any of those picks felt a little too safe for you, okay, how about a player on the worst team in the league and, as promised, a tight end? All right, Chris, you're up first.
I guess I'm covering the player on the worst team in the league, which, yeah, that's fair. It's the worst team in the league. It's the Jets. Look, I love Breece Hall this week. I debated, like, can I do it? Can I do it? But it was like something was telling me, you gotta have Breece Hall this week. So let's do it. Let's go on Breece Hall. Sure, it has not been great for Breece Hall pretty much all season, and especially, since Braylon Allen went down, everybody thought that's it. We're getting Breece Hall. It's going to be great. No, it has not been great. It's been pretty far from great, but it's not because of the volume here. You look at it in the 3 games that Braylon Allen hasn't played this year. He ranks 9th among all running backs in rush attempts. He's got the 4th highest explosive run percentage of all running backs, and he's gotten 100% of the teams inside the 5 carries. Now, granted, they haven't had a ton of inside the 5 carries, but at least it gives us the confidence that if they get inside the 5-yard line, he's the guy that's going to get the ball. We don't have to worry about Isaiah Davis vulturing a touchdown. And this week, we probably don't have to worry about Justin Fields vulturing a touchdown because it sounds like he's getting benched for Tyrod Taylor. But the other thing I love about this matchup is it's the Bengals. The Bengals now allowing the most fantasy points to running backs. I think you have to take a chance on Breece Hall here. But not only that, schematically, it matches up perfectly for Breece Hall. You look at it right now, 71% of his attempts are those outside zone rushes. He averages 4.76 yards per carry on those runs versus 4.12 on those inside runs. This is an explosive home run hitting athlete. You want to get this guy on the edge, out in space where he can just run away from the defense. I think he can do it this week because the Bengals allow the 4th most yards per carry on those outside runs, 5.1 yards per carry versus just 4.48 yards per carry on those inside runs. I think we see Breece Hall rip off a couple of explosives, maybe one huge touchdown run this week. I think against the Bengals, as bad as Breece Hall and the Jets have been, it's too good of a matchup. I think you got to take a chance.
Now, my boom pick, sort of a gut feeling here that this is going to be a big week, but also very much based statistically and on the matchup. I'm going to go with Dalton Kincaid for Buffalo. All right, so yeah, I get this is a guy that has given you 0 points for the last 2 weeks because they were on bye last week and because he missed the previous week, right? He was out week 6, had an injury, and he should be back. He's fine, good to go here. Now, if you take away that one game, if you look at a per game basis, he is the leading receiver for the Bills in targets per game and receptions per game. This is still an offense that likes to distribute the ball fairly evenly, right? You got a guy like Kincaid, Shakir. I'm not even going to count Keon Coleman because like half of his production came in that week 1, shootout that they had against the Baltimore defense. Almost doesn't even count. Look, Kincaid is basically Josh Allen's go-to for the most part. And this week, he's going to go to him over and over again, not only because he's been missing him, but also because Kincaid gets the Carolina Panthers. This Panthers team is the most zone-heavy team, and that is why they're always among the very worst in terms of giving up points to the tight end, because there's plenty of space to operate across the middle of the field. This is exactly where Josh Allen goes the most. Not to those outside receivers, it's to the slot receiver Shakir, to the tight end Kincaid. And now that Kincaid is back, this is a perfect matchup for him. Perfect time for him to get back involved. And I think a lot of people don't even realize how good Kincaid has been, partly because, he hasn't done anything the last couple of weeks. He's only gone below 10 fantasy points once this year, and he's gone over 15 fantasy points 3 times. I'm rounding up because his last game was 14.8, but good enough. And again, Carolina is very soft against tight end. They give up the most yards per target to the tight end position at 9.9. So I know it's risky to pick a tight end. He's not going to necessarily get 10 to 15 targets. He's not necessarily going to have the chance to get a 50-plus yard touchdown, but I think he will thrive on the volume he is given. So here we go. It's a heavy bye week. You got Dalton Kincaid. Just don't think twice. You're going to need help making those tough decisions. That's why we got Start Sit for every position and everything else you need to win in Week 8. Of course, It's in the playlist.